Welcome back to the couch, you amazing, twisted mother lovers. I power myself with research each and every week to bring you the most ultimate twisted story I possibly can. And remember, everything I cover is based on true events. So go ahead and pull up that twisted couch and invite your friends back over because it is time for me to again open my twisted book and take you on a journey into the unknown. In today's episode of Twisted Couch Talk. Welcome back to the couch, you amazing twist heads. It is Friday, and I hope you guys are having a fantastic Friday. You're having a great work week, or you're just getting done with your studies, or you guys are getting ready to eat some delicious ass dinner. Whatever it is you guys are doing, thank you for coming back and listening to this episode of Twisted Couch Talk. Oh man, I got a good one for you guys. It's a very well-known story, but it's gonna make your stomach turn. I've heard of this man and everything, but not like this. But before we get into the story, let's go ahead and get to the country shout-outs. Finland, Canada, United Kingdom, Denmark, India, and Japan. If you guys have been listening, we got 2 new ones, India and Japan. Welcome to the couch, you guys. It is warm and cozy and fucking crazy. We have a great time. I hope you guys really enjoy the story, and welcome to the couch. Real quick, you guys can find me anywhere. You can literally Google Twisted Couch Talk, and it'll pull up everything. Patreon, everything. It's so cool. Anywhere you can hear a podcast, you can find me. The Facebook page, you guys, okay? The Facebook page. I need everybody to stop what you're doing right now. Go over there, put your KFC down and lick your fingers, get all that grease off because your finger's going to slide off the button. We can't allow that. We need full contact with that damn follow button because you need to stay in the now. Yes, I say it every week. You got to stay in the now, not the past or future, in the very now. Because if you don't, you won't know what's going on. Because if you were on Facebook, you would know that today I posted that sadly there will not be a country bonus episode this week. And it's not because I didn't want to. It's simply because I just keep running out of time. Real quick, I'll fill you in. I have 6 kids. I work 6 hours a day. 10 hours a week, 10 hours a week, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. And trying to find the time to put 2 episodes in a podcast a week is actually really difficult. So I'm trying really hard and I'm going to get it done. It's just going to take a little bit of time. I apologize for the delay, which leads to the very next thing, Patreon. If you guys support the Patreon, I could eventually do this full time and come out with episodes all the time. Patreon, if you want to support me, please do. I would greatly appreciate it. But I do have a challenge. I have a challenge every week for you guys. Go find out what kind of twisted twist head you are. That's my challenge to you guys. Which one are you? Post it at Facebook. I want to find out which twist head are you. Also, you guys can donate anytime to PayPal. And you just use the podcast email. And boom, it's done. Lastly, any donation I get on Patreon and PayPal, you guys will get shout outs at the end. I recommend using something that you would want to promote, but if you want me to use your name, I'll be more than happy to do so. But enough of all that business bullcrap. I know why you guys are here, and I know why you came and sat on the couch. It wasn't to spend money. You guys want me to open up my book and just give you a fucked up, twisted story that's going to make your jaw drop. So let's get out of the business and jump on in. But every week, you guys already know, I got some questions. My first one, do you like KFC? Oh yeah, you know what I'm talking about. That delicious golden chicken that only Colonel Sanders could master. Or what about clowns? Are they scary or are they fun and entertaining to you guys? Hey Georgie, want to taste my leg? We all float down here, and soon you'll float too. Well, if that didn't just scare the holy shit out of you, this definitely might. And you would definitely want to stay away from this motherfucker. Wait a minute. Wait, who are we talking about? Well, let's go to the closest KFC restaurant, order us a big bucket because it's going to be a long story. Eat some of this delicious chicken and find out who exactly John Wayne Gacy really was. Okay, so John Wayne Gacy was born in Chicago, Illinois on March 17th, 1942. He was the second born in his family, and he was the only son of John Stanley Gacy. His father was born June 20th, 1900, and would pass on December 25th, 1969. He was admitted to the Veterans Administration Hospital in Illinois on December 18th, 1969, and he would die there about a week later. His father was also an auto repair mechanic and a World War II veteran. Some boys are born raised to wave the flag. Ooh, the red, white, and blue. Sorry, just veterans. You already know where I'm at. If you heard the last episode, you already know what I'm talking about. But anyways, John Wayne Gacy's mother was Marion Elaine Robinson, and she was born May 4th, 1908, and she would sadly pass on December 6th, 1989. His mother was a homemaker, or in other words, a housewife. She'd stay home, take care of the kids, clean the house, cook, your typical housewife stuff. Gacy was of Polish and Danish ancestry, and his family had also been Catholic. His grandparents had immigrated to the United States from Poland in the late 1800s. Gacy was close to his mother and two sisters, but he had endured a difficult relationship with his father. His father was a lot like Eileen Warnos and loved chugging down that sweet firewater and beating the holy living shit out of his entire family. And that's not a joke. He really did love chugging down that firewater and just beating the snot out of his entire family. Yeah, it's one of those guys. You got to think back in the 60s, and that's how it was back then. You could beat the crap out of your wife or anybody, and that's what it was. It's horrible. That's actually really shitty. But his father was not only physically abusive to him, he had also been very mentally abusive by belittling him constantly and calling him dumbass and stupid, and would compare him negatively with his sisters. Why can't you be more like her? Why can't you be more like your sister? Gacy would say that one of his earliest memories was his father beating the holy hell out of him with a leather belt because he accidentally disarranged some components of a car engine that his father was assembling. So he was a kid running through the garage, and a lot like A Christmas Story, he had a pail of nuts, and he kicked it and said, "Oh, fudge." His father grabbed him up, picked him up off the ground, and beat the holy living shit out of him. Okay, if you didn't get that last reference, Christmas Story. It comes on TBS all day long, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. I mean, it's a tradition in my household and my upbringing. So sorry, that's what I do. I do references. Anything that pops to my mind as I'm reading the script, it comes out. So get used to it. But anyways, this kind of lifted my spirits a little bit. I always thought this was kind of awesome when, there was an abusive person, whether it's a female or a male, to a child, the other parent would stick up for that other child because, in those kind of moments, that means everything to that child. That's good. Crappy situation all the way around, but good nonetheless. So yeah, his mother would constantly try to shield her son from his father's abuse. But that would only result in his father yelling at him and saying he was a sissy and a mama's boy and a sissy boy and who would probably grow up a queer. But anyways, despite all the mistreatment, Gacy still loved his father and wanted nothing more than his father's approval, but felt he was never good enough in his father's eyes. In 1949, Gacy's father was informed that his son and another boy had been caught sexually fondling a young girl. His father whipped the holy living shit out of him with a razor strop as punishment. And just so you guys know, a razor strop was used more in the early 1900s and throughout the 1900s by barbers to keep their blade, good and sharp and to, polish and etc. That same year, a family friend and contractor would sometimes molest Gacy in his truck. Gacy would never tell his father about this because he was terrified what his father would say or do to him, but overall he was afraid that his father would blame him. Gacy was an overweight and unathletic child, mainly because of a heart condition that he had when he was young and was told to avoid all sports at school. During the 4th grade, Gacy would start to experience blackouts, possibly from all the abuse from his father. One of my guesses, he would be hospitalized many times here and there because of these random blackouts. Also, in 1957, he would have a burst appendix and would be rushed to the hospital. Gacy later estimated that between the ages of 14 and 18, he spent almost a year in the hospital, and due to that, his grades would harshly fall, and he would miss out on a lot of school. His father suspected these episodes were an effort to gain sympathy and attention, and would even openly accuse his son of faking the condition while his son was laying in a hospital bed. Gacy's a piece of shit guy, but his father, wow. Although his mother, sisters, and a few close friends never doubted his illness, Gacy's medical condition was never confidently diagnosed. Although they did have some ideas, but it was never diagnosed. It was believed that at the age of 11, he suffered from a blow to the head from a swing, and over time, that's what would cause him to have frequent blackouts, until doctors found a blood clot in his brain and was later removed with medications. One of Gacy's friends from high school would recall several instances of Gacy's father ridiculing or beating his son without any provocation. Think about it. I'll say this all anonymously, but I have actually been in that situation. I was about 12 years old. I had this really good friend, and he would always tell me about how his father would beat him and just stand over him and make him do push-ups and just beat the shit out of him with a belt when he wasn't doing good enough. He would come to school with bruises, black eyes, and it was about wintertime. I remember this like it was yesterday. It was wintertime. I was in middle school, so I'm probably 10. I honestly can't remember what the age range is, but maybe 11, 10, 11. And I remember all I wanted to do was help him. But I'm a kid, and what can you do? One weekend during the winter, I asked him if he could stay the night. My father told me no, but his father told him yes. And so I was like, I got to get him out of here. So I took my heater from my bedroom, and I put him in my shed. My father's shed, actually. And I put a heater on and blankets and all that so he'd be good through the night. My father found out what was going on. And I'm very proud of my father, honestly, very, very proud of my father. And because everybody was wanting to know where his son was and all this. So I told my dad through tears, I was like, Dad, this is what's going on. I've seen it at his house. And my dad was like, I love my dad. My dad was like, man, you should have told me because I'd have went over there. Like, that's just how my dad is. But he ended up getting away from his abusive father. And man, if you know who you are, and if you're listening to this, bro, hit me up. I can't find you on Facebook or anything. But yeah, I hope and I pray that he was okay. What I'm saying is, make a stand. If you're seeing abuse, no matter what it is, call this number. So if you know of anybody that's in a domestic type of situation, give this number a call. Or if you are in a domestic type situation, give this number a call. 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. Nobody deserves to suffer in silence. I say it a lot. Do not suffer in silence. Give that number a phone call. You can get help. You can get away from the situation. But now, back to the story. On one occasion in 1957, he would witness Gacy's father walking up the stairs, drunk as fuck, from the family basement and began to belittle his son and then would start beating the holy shit out of him for no apparent reason. Gacy's mother attempted to intervene while her defenseless son put up his hands to defend himself, and according to Gacy's friend, he never attempted to strike his father or stop anything during these altercations. Honestly, probably because his father would beat the holy living shit out of him even more if he ever tried to fight back. He may not have gotten up from the floor. But John would fail to graduate high school and would seek out politics. Okay. In 1960, at the age of 18, Gacy became involved in politics, working as an assistant captain for a Democratic Party candidate in his neighborhood. This did nothing but lead to more criticism from his father, who accused his son of being a patsy. And for those who don't know what a patsy is a person who is easily taken advantage of, especially by being cheated or blamed for something. Gacy later speculated his decision to become involved in politics was to seek the acceptance from others that he never got from his father. The same year Gacy's political involvement began, his father bought him a car. He kept the vehicle's title in his own name until Gacy could finish paying it off. These monthly payments took several years for him to complete. His father would confiscate the keys to the vehicle if Gacy did not do as he said. And to be honest, that's abuse of power right there. In 1962, Gacy purchased an extra set of keys after his father confiscated the original set. In response, his father removed the distributor cap, keeping the component for 3 days. Gacy recalled he felt totally sick and drained after this incident, but just after his father replaced the distributor cap, Gacy then left home and drove to Las Vegas, Nevada. He would find work within the ambulance service before he was transferred to work as an attendant at Palm Mortuary. As a mortuary attendant, Gacy had no home and would have no choice but to sleep in a cot behind the embalming room. He worked there for 3 months observing the process of embalming dead bodies. Gacy had later confessed one evening, while alone, he had climbed into the coffin of a deceased teenage male, embracing and caressing the body before experiencing a sense of shock. Ugh, that's fucking gross. When I first read that, it literally made my fucking skin crawl. Ugh, I literally just almost threw up. Okay, imagine you're climbing into a coffin. Not just any coffin, not yours or a dead person's. Okay, but they're not just dead. They're dead in the coffin, and you lay with this dead person in the coffin. See, the shit that would scare me is, are their eyes open looking at you? The dead eyes, man. Open gape mouth. They're paler because they lose, you lose color of any type whenever you die, so they're more paler. That just makes my skin crawl. Anyways, this prompted Gacy to call his mother the next day and ask her whether his father would allow him to return home. His father would agree, and the same day Gacy drove back to Chicago. On returning home, Gacy enrolled at Northwestern Business College, despite failing to get his high school diploma. He would graduate from the college in 1963 and would take a management trainee position with the Nunn Bush Shoe Company. Then, in 1964, the shoe company had transferred him to Springfield, Illinois, to work as a salesman and eventually promote him to manager of his department. In March of that year, he would meet and begin a relationship and quickly became engaged to Mary Lynn Myers, a coworker. During their romantic engagement, Gacy joined the local Jaycees and worked tirelessly for them, being named key man in April 1964. That same year, Gacy would say that he had a second homosexual experience. According to Gacy, one of his colleagues would pile him with drinks and invite him to come back to his house and hang out. And Gacy saw no issue with this. So with this, he would say, "Let's go, come on." His colleague would offer to chill on the couch and watch some TV, so Gacy would go and take a seat on the couch. His colleague would then perform oral sex on him while he was drunk, but Gacy wouldn't stop him, and then afterwards would go home. By 1965, Gacy had risen to the position of vice president of the Springfield Jaycees. The same year, he was named the third most outstanding Jaycee in the state of Illinois. Also, for those who don't know, a Jaycee is a member of a junior chamber of commerce, a civic organization for businesses and community leaders. After 6 months of being engaged, Gacy and Myers would take the leap of faith and married in September of 1964. Marilyn's father subsequently purchased 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants in Waterloo, Iowa, also known as KFC, where that beautiful bastard Colonel Sanders discovered his secret blend of herbs and spices to make that delicious golden chicken that we all know and love. So the couple So the couple would move to Iowa so Gacy could manage the restaurants, with the understanding that they would move into Marilyn's parents' former home, which had been vacated for the couple. The offer was just so good you had to sink your teeth into it. Gacy would receive $1,500 per year. And right now that doesn't really seem that much, but back then that was $124,000 a year. A year. And he would get a share of the restaurant's profits. So this man was making some fucking money. God dang. Let me make that much with this podcast. Come on, guys. Donate, please. Donate down below. It's in the description. Go click it. I want some KFC. I would love to taste it. I ain't had it in so long. He would go on to open a quote-unquote club in his basement where his employees would drink alcohol and play pool. Although Gacy employed teenagers of both sexes at his restaurants, he socialized only with the young men. Gacy gave many of them alcohol before he made sexual advances. If they rebuffed him, he would claim that his advances were simply a joke or a test of morals. Gacy and his wife would have 2 children. Marilyn had given birth to a son in February 1966 and a daughter in March 1967. Gacy later described this period of his life as perfect, and he finally earned his father's approval after so long. When Gacy's parents visited in July 1966, his father privately apologized for the physical and emotional abuse he had inflicted throughout his son's childhood and adolescence and said, "Son, I was wrong about you." And he shook Gacy's hand. So after that, it just put that spark in Gacy's belly to just continue doing what he's doing. So in Waterloo, Gacy would go on to join the local Jaycees chapter regularly, offering extended hours to the organization in addition to the 12 and 14-hour days he had worked managing the other 3 KFC restaurants. So on top of the KFC restaurants, he would, do the stuff, the Jaycees chapter, picking up any hours he could. At meetings, Gacy often provided fried chicken and insisted on being called the Colonel. And just so you know, don't you soil the Colonel's good name like that. You disgust me. You are not worthy of such a title, you piece of dirty dog garbage. How dare you soil the good name of the Colonel? But something you might not have known, he and other Waterloo Jaycees were deeply involved in wife swapping, prostitution, pornography, and drug use. It didn't say what kind of drug use, so I don't know if it was just, the sweet devil's lettuce or the stuff that people like to smoke that caused them to steal the change out of your fucking car if you don't lock it. Make sure you guys lock your cars at night, because fucking tweaking, trashy people like to come up and steal all the change out of your little change jar, and then when you get on the turnpike to pay the toll, you can't pay the damn toll because these tweakers are stealing all your damn change. Damn these tweakers. So they did do drugs and stuff, but I don't think it was that intense. Probably just some cocaine and all that. Although Gacy was considered ambitious and something of a braggart, and a braggart is, somebody who's boastful, somebody who is talking about all these great things. They just sit there and brag, and they brag. The other Jaycees held him in high regard for his frustrating work, and in 1967, they named him Outstanding Vice President of the Waterloo Jaycees. That same year, Gacy served on the board of directors. In August 1967, Gacy sexually assaulted 15-year-old Donald Voorhees, the son of a fellow Jaycee. Gacy lured Voorhees to his house upon the promise of showing him heterosexual stag films that they regularly played at Jaycee events. Gacy piled Voorhees with alcohol and allowed him to watch the stag movies, then persuaded him to engage in mutual oral sex, adding, "You have to have sex with a man before you start having sex with a woman, because woman has the word men in it. And men are superior over all. And if you don't have sex with a man, then damn it, you're never going to know how to please a woman." God, what? That really happened. He really said that. Could you imagine somebody walking up to you, "Let's go get some drinks, blah, blah, blah," and they look at you and they just burp, like they're like, those beer burps. And they're, "You have to have sex with a man before you can have sex with a woman. You understand me, boy? Now go ahead and listen. Listen here now. You gotta have sex with a woman No, goddamn, I'm drinking too much. Hold on. You gotta have sex with a man. Yes, a man first, and then a woman. The man comes first, okay? When they talked about when God made everything, he made Adam first. He didn't make Eve, okay? And then it just goes on into his drunken, nonsensical ass ways of talking. Yeah. Gacy had tricked several teenagers into believing he was commissioned to conduct homosexual experiments in the interests of scientific research and paid them up to $50 each. In March 1968, Voorhees reported to his father that Gacy had sexually assaulted him. Voorhees Sr. immediately informed the police, who arrested Gacy and charged him with performing oral sodomy on Voorhees and the attempted assault of a 16-year-old Edward Lynch. Gacy strongly denied the charges and demanded to take a polygraph test. The results in the polygraph test indicated Gacy was nervous when he denied any wrongdoing in the relation to both of the young men, which means he was deceptive, he was lying, and like I said before in the last episode, I believe in the polygraphs. I don't know if everybody does, but I think that if you're nervous to a certain point, it's going to detect that. Why would you be nervous if you have nothing to lie about, you know? Gacy would publicly deny any wrongdoing and insisted the charges against him were politically motivated. Voorhees Sr. had opposed Gacy's nomination for appointed as the president of the Iowa Jaycees. Several fellow Jaycees found Gacy's story credible and rallied to his support. However, on May 10th, 1968, Gacy was indicted on the sodomy charge. On August 30th, 1968, Gacy persuaded one of his employees, 18-year-old Russell Schroeder, to physically assault Voorhees in an effort to discourage the boy from testifying against him in court. Gacy had promised to pay Schroeder $300 for the task. Schroeder agreed that in early September, he lured Voorhees to an isolated park, sprayed mace in his eyes, and then beat the hell out of him. Voorhees escaped and reported the assault to the police, identifying Schroeder as his attacker. Then they arrested him the following day. While initially denying any involvement, Schroeder soon confessed to assaulting Voorhees, indicating that he had done it at Gacy's request for money. Police arrested Gacy and laid an additional charge of hiring Schroeder to assault and intimidate Voorhees. On September 12th, Gacy was ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation at the Psychiatrist Hospital of the University of Iowa. 2 doctors examined him over a period of 17 days before concluding he had an antisocial personality disorder, the clinical term for sociopathy or psychopathy, and was unlikely to benefit from any therapy or medical treatment. And this behavior pattern was likely to bring him into repeated conflicts with society. Psychiatrists would say about Gacy's evaluation that the most striking aspect of the test results, the patient showed total denial of responsibility for everything that had happened to him. He can produce an alibi for everything. He presents himself as a victim of circumstances and blames other people who are out to get him. The patient attempts to assure sympathetic responses by depicting himself as being at the mercy of a hostile environment. The doctors concluded he was mentally competent to stand trial. On November 7th, 1968, Gacy would plead guilty to 1 count of sodomy in relation to Voorhees, but not guilty to the charges related to the other use. Gacy claimed Voorhees had offered himself to him and that he had acted out of curiosity. But his story was not believed. Gacy was convicted of sodomy on December 3rd and sentenced to 10 years of imprisonment to be served at the Anamosa State Penitentiary. That same day, Gacy's wife petitioned a divorce requesting that she be awarded the couple's home and property, sole custody of their 2 children, and alimony. The court, obviously, without a doubt, ruled in her favor, and the divorce was finalized on September 18th, 1969. Gacy had never saw his first wife or children ever again. During his incarceration, Gacy rapidly acquired a reputation as a model prisoner. Because of his cooking, he would go on to cook for a lot of the guards, and they would be really lenient with him they would let him do basically whatever he wanted while he was in prison. And because he was just such a good and outstanding prisoner by being very helpful, etc., they let him out early. He also joined the inmate JC chapter and increased its membership from 50 to 650 men in less than 18 months. By the summer of 1969, Gacy had overseen the installation of a miniature golf course in the prison recreational yard. While he was sitting there looking over a clipboard of some notes and seeing what's going on and what they can do better and be more efficient, Happy Gilmore pops out of nowhere and screams, "You're gonna die, clown!" and runs across the yard with the golf club and smacks John Wayne Gacy across the face with it, knocking his nose off and saying, "Just a little tap, 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 a little taparoo. Go to your home, Ball. Why are you not going home? Are you too good for your home? Come on, Bob Barker, I'll beat your ass. Bring it on." I'm sorry. Bob Barker was not in the prison. Happy Gilmore did not show up. But Shooter McGavin did show up, and he was running away from that giant bastard trying to get the golden coat. Okay, I'm done. No, none of that happened. But Gacy really did oversee an installation of a miniature golf course in the prison. In June 1969, Gacy was denied parole. To prepare for a second scheduled parole hearing in May 1970, he completed 16 high school courses, for which he obtained his diploma in November 1969. On Christmas Day in 1969, Gacy's father had died from cirrhosis of the liver. When informed of his father's death, Gacy collapsed to the floor, sobbing and crying through his fingers. His request for supervised leave to attend his father's funeral was harshly denied. This would crush him, and for the rest of his life, he would feel guilty in that it was all his fault that his father died, and he felt that his father had died due to disappointment because Gacy went to jail. Gacy was granted parole with 12 months probation on June 18, 1970, after having served 18 months of his 10-year sentence. He was released due to being an outstanding prisoner, like I was saying earlier. Conditions of his probation included that Gacy relocated to Chicago to live with his mother and that he must abide by a 10 p.m. curfew. On release, Gacy told friend and fellow JC, Clarence Lane, when he had picked Gacy up from the prison, Gacy would say, "I'm never going back to jail," and that he intended to re-establish himself in Waterloo. However, within 24 hours of his release, Gacy had relocated to Chicago. He arrived there on June 19th and shortly therefore obtained a job as a short-order cook in a restaurant. On February 12, 1971, Gacy was charged with sexually assaulting a teenage boy who claimed that he had lured him into his car at a Chicago's Greyhound bus terminal and driven him to his home, where he had attempted to force the boy into sex. The court dismissed this complaint when the boy failed to appear. On June 22nd, Gacy was arrested and charged with aggravated sexual battery and reckless conduct. The arrest was in response to a complaint filed by a teen boy who claimed that Gacy had flashed a sheriff's badge, lured him into his car, and forced him to perform oral sex. These charges dropped after the boy accused Gacy of his crime and attempted to blackmail him. The Iowa Board of Patrol did not learn of these incidences, and 18 months later, in October 1971, Gacy's parole ended. The following month, records of Gacy's previous criminal convictions were sealed. With financial assistance from his mother, Gacy had bought a ranch house near the village of Northridge in Norwood Park Township, Chicago. He resided at the address 8213 West Summerdale Avenue until his arrest in December 1978, and according to Gacy, he had committed all of his murders there. Gacy was active in his local community and helpful towards his neighbors, and he willingly loaned his construction tools and plowed snow from neighborhood sidewalks free of charge. Between 1974 and 1978, he hosted annual summer parties, each devoted to a particular theme. These events were attended by up to 400 people, including politicians. In August 1971, shortly after Gacy and his mother moved into the house, he became engaged to Carol Hoff, whom he had briefly dated in high school. They were married on July 1st, 1972. Carol and her two young daughters from a previous marriage moved into Gacy's home soon after the couple announced their engagement. His mother moved out of the house shortly before they got married. By 1975, Gacy had told his wife that he was bisexual. After the couple had sex on Mother's Day that year, he would inform her that this would be the last time that they would ever have sex. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't think that would fly very well with my lady or any of your guys' significant others. I don't think that any of your guys' significant others are going to let that fly. I'm just saying, especially on Valentine's Day. He began spending most evenings away from home, only to return in the early hours of the morning with the excuse that he had been working late. Carol observed Gacy bringing teenage boys into his garage in the early hours and found game pornography and men's wallets and identifications inside the house. When she confirmed Gacy about who these items belonged to, he informed her angrily that it was none of her damn business. Following a heated argument when she failed to balance a checkbook correctly in October 1975, Carol asked Gacy for a divorce. He agreed to his wife's request, although, by mutual agreement, she continued to live at the West Somerdale house until February 1976. After that, she and her daughters would go on to move into their own apartment. 1 month later, on March 2nd, the Gacy divorce, decreed upon the false ground of Gacy's infidelity with women, was finalized. In 1971, Gacy established a part-time construction business, PDM Contractors. The initials PDM were painting, decorating, and maintenance. With the approval of his probation officer, Gacy worked evenings on his construction contracts while working as a cook during the day. Initially, he undertook minor repair work such as sign writing, pouring concrete, reconcreting, but later expanded to include projects such as interior design, remodeling, installation, assembly, and landscaping. In mid-1973, Gacy quit his job as a cook so he could commit fully to his construction business. By 1975, PDM was expanding rapidly, and Gacy was working up to 16 hours a day. In March 1977, he became a supervisor for PE Systems, a firm specializing in the remodeling of drugstores. Between PE Systems and PDM, Gacy worked on up to 4 projects simultaneously and frequently traveled to other states. By 1978, PDM's annual revenue was over $200,000. Through his membership in local Moose Club, Gacy became aware of a Jolly Joker clown club whose members regularly performed at fundraising events and parades in addition to voluntary entertaining hospitalized children. In late 1975, Gacy joined the clown club and created his own characters, Pogo the Clown and Patches the Clown, and he would go on to devise his own makeup and costumes. He described Pogo as a happy clown, but when he described Patches was more of a serious character. Gacy seldom earned money for his performances and later said that acting as a clown allowed him to regress into his childhood. He performed as both Pogo and Patches at numerous local parties, political functions, charitable events, and children's hospitals. Sometimes Gacy would actually stay in his clown getup after performances and briefly drink at a local bar before returning home. Gacy's voluntary public service as a clown throughout his years of his murders led to him being known as the Clown Killer. Much of PDM's workforce consisted of high school students and young men. Gacy would often make propositions of his workers for sex or insist on sexual favors in return for acts such as leading his vehicles, financial assistance, or promotions. Gacy also claimed to own guns, once telling an employee, "Do you know how easy I can get one of my guns and kill you? And how easy it would be to get rid of your body?" Wow, fuck that. In 1973, Gacy and a teenage employee traveled to Florida to view a property Gacy had purchased. On the first night in Florida, Gacy raped the employee in the hotel room. After returning to Chicago, this employee drove to Gacy's house and beat the holy living shit out of him in his yard. Fuck yeah, bro. Hell yeah. Got a little bit of justice out of that one. I wish you would have just, decapitated him while you were at it. Would have saved a lot of heartbreak. But Gacy got his fucking ass kicked, and I love that. Gacy told his wife he had been attacked for refusing to pay him for poor quality painting work. In May 1975, Gacy hired 15-year-old Anthony Antonucci. 2 months later, he went to Antonucci's home, knowing the youth had injured his foot in an accident the previous day. The two drank a bottle of wine, then watched a heterosexual stage film before Gacy wrestled him to the floor and cuffed his hands behind his back. One cuff was loose, and the young man freed his arm while Gacy was out of the room. When Gacy returned, Antonucci, a high school wrestler, pounced on him. He wrestled Gacy to the floor, obtained possession of the handcuff key, and cuffed Gacy's hands behind his back. At first, Gacy threatened Antonucci, then calmed down and promised to leave if he would remove the handcuffs. He would agree, and Gacy left. The young teen later recalled that Gacy told him, "Not only are you the only one to get out of handcuffs, you got them on me." On July 26, 1976, Gacy picked up 18-year-old David Cram as he hitchhiked to Elson Avenue. Gacy offered him a job with PDM, and he began work that same evening. On August 21st, Cram moved into his house that next day. Cram and Gacy had several drinks to celebrate his 19th birthday, with Gacy dressed as Pogo the Clown. Gacy conned Cram into putting the handcuffs on, his wrists cuffed in the front of his body rather than behind. He swung Cram around while holding the chain linking the handcuffs and said he intended to rape him. Cram kicked Gacy in the fucking face and freed himself out of the handcuffs and got away. A month later, Gacy appeared at Cram's bedroom door intending to rape him, saying, "Dave, you really don't know who I am. Maybe it'd be good if you just gave me what I want." Cram resisted, straddling Gacy, who left the bedroom, stating, "You ain't no fun." Cram moved out on October 5th and left PDM, although he did periodically work for Gacy over the following years. Shortly after Cram moved out of Gacy's house, another employee, 18-year-old Michael Rosie, moved in. Rosie had worked for PDM since May 1976, and he lived with Gacy until April 1977. Rosie sometimes assisted Gacy in clowning at grand openings of businesses, Gacy as Pogo and Rosie as Patches. Gacy was with First Lady Rosalind Carter on May 6, 1978, and they had taken a picture together 6 years after his first murder, then 7 months before his final arrest. Gacy also entered local Democratic Party politics, initially offering use of his employees to clean the party's headquarters at no charge. He was rewarded for his community service and appointed to serve the Northwood Park Township Street Lighting Committee, subsequently earning the title of the main captain. In 1975, Gacy was appointed the director of Chicago's annual Polish Day Parade, an event he would supervise until 1978. Through his work with the parade, Gacy met and was photographed with the First Lady Rosalind Carter on May 6, 1978. The event later became an embarrassment to the United States Secret Service. In the picture, Gacy is wearing an S-pin, indicating a person gave him special clearance. Gacy's first known murder occurred on January 3, 1972. According to Gacy's statement, he decided to drive to the Civic Center in the Loop to view a display of ice sculptures in the early hours of the following morning. He then lured a 16-year-old named Timothy Jack McCoy, a young man with long hair and a coat from Chicago's Greyhound bus terminal, into his car. McCoy was traveling from Michigan to Omaha, Nebraska. Gacy took McCoy on a sightseeing tour of Chicago and then drove him to his home with the promise that he would spend the night and then drive him back to the station in time to catch his bus. Prior to McCoy's identification, he was known simply as the Greyhound busboy. Gacy claimed he woke up early in the morning to find McCoy standing in his bedroom doorway with a kitchen knife in his hand. He then jumped from his bed, and McCoy raised his arms in a gesture of surrender, tilting the knife upwards and accidentally cutting Gacy's forearm. Gacy twisted the knife from McCoy's wrist, banged his head against the bedroom wall, kicked him against the wardrobe, and walked towards him. McCoy then kicked Gacy in the stomach, doubling him over. Gacy then grabbed McCoy, shouting, "Motherfucker, I'll kill you!" He then wrestled McCoy to the floor and stabbed him repeatedly in the chest as he straddled him. As McCoy lay dying, Gacy claimed he washed his knife in his bathroom and then went into his kitchen and saw an open carton of eggs and a slab of unsliced bacon at his kitchen table. McCoy had also set the table for two. He had walked into Gacy's room to wake him up while he was unknowingly carrying the kitchen knife in his hand to wake him up and talk to him about breakfast. Gacy buried McCoy in his crawl space and later covered his grave with a layer of concrete. In an interview several years after his arrest, Gacy said that immediately after killing McCoy, he felt totally drained, but would go on to say that he stabbed McCoy, and as he listened to the gargulations and gaspings for air, he experienced a mind-numbing orgasm. Ugh, how many of you guys just threw up in your mouth right now? I gotta take another drink to wash mine down. He would go on to add, "This is when I realized that death was the ultimate thrill." On July 31st, 1975, John Butkovich, an 18-year-old PDM employee from Lombard, disappeared. Butkovich's car was found parked near the corner of Sheridan and Lawrence, with his jacket and wallet inside and the keys still in the ignition. The day before his disappearance, Butkovich, real quick, why can't people murder somebody with a simple last name? I am just butchering all these names. Butkovich had confronted Gacy for over 2 weeks about outstanding back pay. His father, a Yugoslav immigrant, had called Gacy, who claimed he was happy to help to search for his son, but was sorry that his son ran away. When questioned by the police, Gacy said Butkovich and two friends had arrived at his house demanding the overdue pay, but they had reached a compromise and all three of them had left. Over the following 3 years, Butkovich's parents called the police more than 100 times, urging them to investigate Gacy further. Gacy later admitted to encountering Butkovich exiting his car at the corner of West Lawrence Avenue, waving to attract his attention. According to Gacy, Butkovich approached his car stating, "I want to talk to you." Gacy invited Butkovich into his car and then invited him back to his home to settle the issue of this overdue wage. At his home, Gacy offered Butkovich a drink, then conned him to handcuff his wrists behind his back. Gacy later confessed to having sat on the kid's chest for a while before he strangled the holy shit out of him. He stowed his body in his garage, intending to bury the body later in the crawl space. When his wife and stepdaughters returned home earlier than expected, Gacy buried Butkovich's body under the concrete floor in the tool room extension of his garage, in an empty space where he had initially intended to dig a drain tile. Gacy said that bodily fluids leaked from the victim's mouth and noses, staining his carpet. As a result, Gacy would often stuff cloth rags, the victim's own underwear, or a sock into the mouths of the victims to prevent such a leakage from coming out and staining his carpet further. In addition to being the year his business expanded, Gacy freely admitted the year 1975 was also when he began to increase the frequency of his excursions for sex with young males. Gacy had committed most of his murders between 1976 and 1978. He largely lived alone following his divorce. He later referred to these as his cruising years. Although Gacy remained gregarious and civic-minded, several neighbors noticed an erratic change in his behavior after his 1976 divorce. This would include seeing him keeping company with young males, hearing his car arrive or depart in the early hours of the morning, or seeing lights in his home switch on and off in the early hours. One neighbor later recollected that for several years the sounds of muffled, high-pitched screaming, shouting, and crying had repeatedly wakened her and her son up in the early morning hours. I'm sorry, but if somebody's yelling loud enough to reach your house and it wakes you up in the middle of the night, you should probably call the cops. Call the cops. If you guys hear screaming in the middle of the night and, there ain't no reason for you to be here screaming, you should probably call the cops and report it so that way bastards like this don't get away with this disgusting shit. 1 month after his divorce was finalized, Gacy abducted and murdered 18-year-old Daryl Sampson. He was last seen alive in Chicago on April 6, 1976. Gacy had buried him under the dining room with a section of cloth lodged in his throat. 5 weeks later, on the afternoon of May 14th, 15-year-old Randall Raffett disappeared shortly after returning to his uptown home from a dental appointment. He was last seen by his grandmother that afternoon. Hours after Rafet was last seen by his family, 14-year-old Samuel Stapleton vanished as he walked home from his sister's apartment. He and Rafet were close acquaintances. Both were buried together in his crawl space, and investigators believe the two were murdered the same evening. On July 3rd, Gacy killed a 17-year-old Lakeview teenager named Michael Bonin. He disappeared while traveling to Chicago to Waukegan. Gacy strangled Bonin with a rope and buried him under the spare bedroom. 10 days later, Gacy murdered a 16-year-old teen named William Carroll and buried him in the common grave in the crawl space. Carroll seemed to have been the first of 4 victims known to have been murdered between June 13th and August 6, 1976. 3 were between 16 and 17 years old, and 1 identified murder victim appears to have been an adult. On August 5th, a 16-year-old Minnesota youth named James Hackinson is last known to have phoned his family, possibly from Gacy's home. Hackinson would sadly die due to suffocation. His body was buried in the crawl space beneath the body of a 17-year-old Bennettsville youth named Rick Johnson, who was last seen alive on August 6th. Gacy is thought to have murdered 2 further unidentified males between August and October of 1976. On October 22nd, Gacy abducted and killed teenage friends Kenneth Parker and Michael Marano. The 2 were last seen outside a restaurant on Clark Street in Chicago. 2 days later, a 19-year-old construction worker, William Bundy, disappeared after informing his family he was to attend a party. Bundy had sadly died due to suffocation. Gacy buried his body beneath his master bedroom. Between November and December of 1976, Gacy murdered a 20-year-old man named Francis Alexander. His last contact with his family was a phone call to his mother that he had made sometime in November. Alexander was buried in the crawl space directly beneath the room Gacy used as his office. In November 1976, another PDM employee, 17-year-old Gregory Godzik, disappeared. His girlfriend was the last to see him outside her house after he had driven her home following a date. And really quickly, you know how bad that had to have sucked for the girl? You know, you go out on a date with this guy, he's handsome and just wows you, and you just wait with anticipation for him to come back and give you a phone call and talk for hours on the phone. Well, she doesn't get to do that because this piece of shit Gacy robbed her of that. So she never gets to see and possibly have what might have been. Godzik had worked for PDM for only 3 weeks before he disappeared. He had informed his family that Gacy made him dig trenches for some kind of drain tiles in his crawl space. Godzik's car was later found abandoned in Niles. His parents and older sister, Eugenia, contacted Gacy about Godzik's disappearance. Gacy claimed that he had run away from home, having indicated before that he had wished to do so. Gacy also claimed that he received an answering machine message from Godzik shortly after he had disappeared. When asked if he could play back the message to Godzik's parents, Gacy said that he had erased it. On January 20th, 1977, Gacy lured 19-year-old John Ciziak to his house in pretext of buying his Plymouth Satellite. He later confessed to strangling him in his spare bedroom, claiming that Rosie was asleep in the house that following morning. Gacy later sold the car to Rosie for $300. 2 months later, on March 15th, a 20-year-old Michigan native named John Prestige disappeared. And with the name Prestige, it just reminds me of Step Brothers, Prestige Worldwide. Wide. And just so you guys can get a little taste of what Prestige Worldwide is about, it's a little bit of this. Boats and hoes. Boats and hoes. I gotta have me more boats and hoes. Boats and hoes. Boats and hoes. I gotta have me more boats and hoes. So, anyways, enough of the boats and hoes. Prestige Worldwide, no. Prestige was last seen leaving a near North Side restaurant. He was then buried in a crawl space above the body of Francis Alexander. Shortly before his disappearance, Prestige had mentioned he had obtained work with a local contractor. Gacy murdered one additional unidentified youth and buried him in the crawl space in the spring or early summer of 1977. The exact time of his murder is unknown. On July 5th, Gacy killed a 19-year-old from Crystal Lake, Matthew Bowman. Bowman's mother last saw him at a suburban train station. He had intended to travel to Harwood Heights for a scheduled court appointment regarding an unpaid parking ticket. The following month, Rosie was arrested for stealing gasoline while driving Cizik's car. The gas station attendant noted the license plate, and the police traced the car back to Gacy's house. When questioned, Gacy told officers that Cizik had sold him the car in February, saying he needed money to leave town. Checking the VIN confirmed the car had belonged to Cizik. The police did not pursue the matter further, although they did inform Cizik's mother that her son had sold his car. By the end of 1977, it is known Gacy had murdered 6 more young men between the ages of 16 and 21. The first of these victims were 18-year-old Robert Gilroy, the son of a Chicago police sergeant, last seen alive on September 15th. Gilroy lived just 4 blocks away from the Gacy house. He was murdered and buried in the crawlspace as well. On September 12th, Gacy had flown to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to supervise a remodeling project and did not return to Chicago until September 16th. Because Gacy is known to have been in another state at the time Gilroy was last seen, this is cited to support Gacy's claim of assistance from one or more accomplices in several homicides. 10 days after Gilroy was last seen, 19-year-old former U.S. Marine John Mowry departed after leaving his mother's house and walked to his apartment. Gacy strangled Mowry and buried his body beneath his master bedroom. On October 17th, 21-year-old Minnesota native Russell Nelson disappeared. He was last seen in a Chicago bar. Nelson was looking for contracting work. Gacy murdered him and buried him beneath the guest bedroom. Less than 4 weeks later, Gacy murdered a 16-year-old Kalamazoo teenager named Robert Winch and buried him in his crawlspace. On November 18th, 20-year-old father of one, Tommy Balling, disappeared after leaving a Chicago bar. 3 weeks after the murder of Tommy Balling, on December 9th, a 19-year-old U.S. Marine, David Talisma, disappeared after informing his mother he was to attend a rock concert in Hammond, Indiana. Gacy strangled Talisma with a rope and buried him in his crawlspace, close to the body of John Mowry. On December 30th, Gacy abducted 19-year-old student Robert Donnelly from a Chicago bus stop at gunpoint. Gacy drove him to his home, where he had raped, tortured, and repeatedly dunked his head into a bathtub until he passed out. Gacy taunted him with statements such as, "Aren't we playing fun games tonight?" Donnelly later testified at Gacy's trial that he was in such pain that he asked Gacy to kill him. Please just kill me." Gacy replied, "I'm getting around to it. I'm getting around to it, all right." After several hours, Gacy drove Donnelly to his workplace and released him, warning him that if he complained to the police, they would simply just not believe him. Donnelly did report the assault to the police, and the police would go on and question Gacy January 6, 1978. Gacy admitted to having a slave sex relationship with Donnelly, but insisted everything was consensual, adding that he did not pay the kid the money he had promised him. The police believed him and filed no charges. The following month, Gacy killed 19-year-old William Kindred, who disappeared on February 16th after telling his fiancée he was going to spend the night at a bar. Kindred was the final victim Gacy buried in his crawlspace. On March 21st, Gacy lured 26-year-old Jeffrey Reginald into his car. Shortly after he entered his car, Gacy chloroformed him and drove him to his house. He would tie his arms and head in restraints fixed to the ceilings, and his feet were locked to the floor. Gacy explained to him he had complete control over him and that he intended to do whatever he wanted to him, when he wanted, and how he wanted. He would then go on to rape and torture Ringnall with various instruments including lit candles and whips, and repeatedly chloroformed him into unconsciousness. Gacy then drove him to Chicago's Lincoln Park, where he was dumped unconsciously but alive. Rignall managed to stagger to his girlfriend's apartment. Police were informed of the assault but did not investigate Gacy. He was able to recall through the haze of the night the Oldsmobile, Kennedy Expressway, and particular side streets. He had two friends stake out the Cumberland exit of the expressway, and in April, Rignall saw the Oldsmobile, which he and his friends followed, 8213 West Somerdale. Police obtained an arrest warrant, and Gacy was arrested on July 15th. He faced trial for battery against Rignall. By 1978, the crawlspace had no room for further bodies. Gacy later confessed to the police that he considered stowing the bodies in his attic initially, but had been worried about complications arising from the leakage, worrying that you put a bunch of dead bodies up there, they're just going to leak through the ceiling and get all over his nice furniture. Therefore, he chose to dispose of his victims off of the I-55 bridge into the Des Plaines River. Gacy stated that he had thrown 5 bodies into the river in 1978. One of which he believed had landed on a passing boat, and only 4 bodies were ever found. The first known victim that was thrown over the bridge into the Des Plaines River was 20-year-old Timothy O'Rourke. He was murdered in mid-June after leaving his Dover Street apartment to purchase cigarettes. Shortly before his disappearance, O'Rourke had told his roommate a contractor on the northwest side had offered him a job. On November 4th, Gacy killed 19-year-old Frank Lanning. His naked body was found in Des Plaines River in Shannon on November 12th. On November 24th, a 20-year-old Elmwood Park resident, James Mazara, disappeared after sharing Thanksgiving dinner with his family. Mazara had informed his sisters the day prior to his disappearance that he would be working in the construction industry, and he's doing all right. He was last seen alive walking in the direction of Bughouse Square, carrying a suitcase. On the afternoon of December 11th, 1978, Gacy visited the Nissan Pharmacy in Des Plaines to discuss a potential remodeling deal with the store owner, Phil Torriff. While he was within earshot of a 15-year-old part-time employee, Robert Piest, Gacy mentioned his firm often hired teenage boys with a starting wage of $5 per hour, almost double the pay Piest earned at the pharmacy. Shortly after Gacy left the pharmacy, Piest's mother arrived to the store to drive her son home so the family could celebrate her birthday together. Piest asked his mother to wait, adding that some contractor wants to talk to me about a job. He left the store at 9 p.m., promising to return shortly. Piest was murdered shortly after 10 p.m. at Gacy's home. Gacy later stated that at his house, he asked Piest whether there was anything he wouldn't do for the right price, to which Piest replied that he did not mind working hard. In response, Gacy stated good money could be earned by hustling. Gacy then duped Piest into handcuffs before saying, "I'm going to rape you, and there's nothing you can do about it," as Piest began weeping. He also stated that he replaced the rope around Piest's neck, and the boy was crying and scared. Gacy admitted to having received a phone call from a business acquaintance as Piest lay dying, suffocating on his bedroom floor. When Piest failed to return home, his family filed a missing persons report with the Des Plaines police. Torriff named Gacy as a contractor Piest had most likely left the store to talk to about a job. Lieutenant Joseph Kosnak, whose son attended Maine West High School like Piest, chose to investigate Gacy further. Having spoken with Piest's mother on the morning of December 12th, Kosnak became convinced Piest had not run away from home. A routine check of Gacy's criminal background revealed that he had an outstanding battery charge against him in Chicago and had served a prison sentence in Iowa for sodomy of a 15-year-old boy. Kosnak and 2 Des Plaines police officers visited Gacy at his home the following evening. Gacy had indicated he had seen 2 youths working at the pharmacy and had asked one of them if there were any remodeling materials behind the store. He was adamant, however, that he had not offered Piest a job and only returned to the pharmacy shortly after 8 p.m. as he had left his appointment book at the store. Gacy had promised to come to the police station later that evening to make a statement confirming this, indicating he was unable to do so at that moment as his uncle had just died. When questioned as to how soon he could come to the police station, he responded, "You guys are very rude. Don't you have any respect for the dead?" At 3:20 a.m., Gacy arrived at the police station covered in mud, claiming that he had been involved in a car accident. On returning to the police station later that day, Gacy denied any involvement in Piest's disappearance and repeated that he had not offered him a job. When asked why he had returned to the pharmacy, Gacy reiterated that he had done so in response to a phone call from Torif informing him that he had left his appointment book at the store. Detectives had already spoken to Torif, who denied calling Gacy. At the request of detectives, Gacy prepared a written statement detailing his movements on December 11th. Suspecting Gacy might be holding Piest against his will at his home, Des Plaines police obtained a search warrant of Gacy's house on December 13th. This search of Gacy's property revealed several suspicious items, including several police badges and a 6mm Beretta starter pistol inside an office drawer, a syringe and hypodermic needle inside the cabinet in Gacy's bathroom. Investigators also found handcuffs, several books on homosexuality with titles such as The Great White Swallow and Pretty Boys Must Die, 7 pornographic films, capsules of amyl nitrate, and an 18-inch dildo in Gacy's bedroom, or, for people who go by metrics, 46 centimeters. A 39-inch or 99-centimeter 2x4 with holes drilled into each end, bottles of Valium, and several driver's licenses were found in the northwest bedroom. In the northwest bathroom, investigators found a class of 1975 Maine West High School ring engraved with the initials JAS. Investigators also recovered a Nissan Pharmacy photo receipt from a trash can alongside a 36-inch or 91 centimeter of nylon rope. The Des Plaines police confiscated Gacy's Oldsmobile and other PDM work vehicles. Police assigned 2 men to start surveillance to monitor Gacy on a rotational 12-hour basis as they continue their investigation into the background and potential involvement in Piest's disappearance. These surveillance teams consisted of Mike Albrich and David Hatchmeister, and Ronald Robinson and Robert Schultz. On December 15th, Des Plaines investigators obtained further details of Gacy's battery charge, learning the complaint Jeffrey Rignall had reported that Gacy lured him into his car and then chloroformed, raped, and tortured him before dumping him, with severe chest and facial burns and rectal bleeding the following morning. In an interview with Gacy's former wife that same day, they learned of the disappearance of John Butkovich. That same day, the Maine West High School ring was traced to John Allen Siak. The interview with Siak's mother revealed that several items from her son's apartment were also missing, including a Motorola TV set. By December 16th, Gacy was becoming affable with the surveillance detectives, regularly inviting them to join him for meals in restaurants and occasionally for drinks in bars or at his home. He repeatedly denied that he had anything to do with Piest's disappearance and accused the officers of harassing him because of his political connections or because of his recreational drug use. Knowing these officers were unlikely to arrest him on anything trivial, he taunted them by flaunting traffic laws and succeeded in losing his pursuers more than once. That afternoon, Cram consented to a police interview in which he described Gacy's hard-working lifestyle and open-minded attitude about sex between men. Cram also revealed that because of his poor timekeeping, Gacy had once given him a watch, explaining he got it from a dead person. Investigators conducted a formal interview of Rosie on December 17th. He had informed them that Gacy sold Ciziek's vehicle to him, explaining that he had bought the car from Ciziek because he had needed money to move to California. A further examination of Gacy's Oldsmobile was conducted on this date. While examining the trunk of the car, investigators discovered a small cluster of fibers they expected to be human hair. That evening, officers conducted a test using 3 trained German Shepherd dogs to determine whether Piest had been present in any of Gacy's vehicles. One dog approached Gacy's Oldsmobile and lay on the passenger seat, and what the dog's handler informed investigators was the death reaction, indicating Piest's body had been present in the vehicle. In the early hours of December 18th, he invited them to a restaurant where, over breakfast, he talked of his businesses, his marriages, and his activity as a registered clown. At one point during the conversation, Gacy remarked, "You know, clowns could get away with murder." By December 18th, Gacy was beginning to show signs of strain from the constant surveillance. He was unshaven, looked tired, appeared anxious, and was drinking heavily. That afternoon, he drove to his lawyer's office to prepare a $750,000 civil suit against the Des Plaines police, demanding that they cease their surveillance. That same day, the serial number of the Nissan Pharmacy photo receipt found in Gacy's kitchen was traced to the 17-year-old Kimberly Byers, a colleague of Piest at Nissan Pharmacy. Byers admitted, when contacted in person the following day, that she had worn the jacket on December 11th to shield herself from the cold. She had placed the receipt in the Parker pocket just before she gave the coat to Piest as he left the store, claiming a contractor wanted to speak with him. This statement contradicted Gacy's previous statement that he had no contact with Robert Piest on the evening of December 11th. That same evening, Rosie was interviewed a second time. This time, he was more cooperative. He informed detectives that in the summer of 1977, he had spread 10 bags of lime in the crawl space of Gacy's house. On December 19th, investigators began compiling evidence for a search warrant for Gacy's house. That same day, Gacy's lawyers filed a civil suit against the Des Plaines police. The hearing for the suit was scheduled for December 22nd. That afternoon, Gacy invited the surveillance detectives inside the house once again. As Officer Robinson distracted Gacy with conversation, Officer Schultz walked into Gacy's bedroom in an unsuccessful attempt to write down the serial number of the Motorola TV set they suspected belonged to John Cizik. While flushing Gacy's toilet, the officer noticed a smell he suspected could be that of a rotting corpse emitting from a heating air duct. The officers who searched Gacy's house previously had failed to notice this, as the house had been cold. Investigators interviewed both Cram and Rosie on December 20th. Rosie had agreed to be interviewed in relation to his possible link with John Cizik, as well as the disappearance of Robert Piest. When questioned by Kozenak as to where he believed Gacy had concealed Piest's body, Rosie replied Gacy may have replaced the body in a crawl space, adding that he thought Cizik's car was stolen. Cram informed investigators of Gacy's attempts to rape him in 1976. He stated that after he and Gacy had returned to his home after the December 13th search of the property, Gacy had turned pale after seeing a clot of mud on his carpet, which he suspected had come from his crawl space. Cram said Gacy had grabbed a flashlight and immediately entered the crawl space to look for evidence of digging. When asked whether he had been to the crawl space, Cram replied he had once been asked by Gacy to spread lime down there and had also dug trenches, which Gacy had explained were for draining pipes. Cram stated these trenches were 2 feet wide, 6 feet long, and 2 feet deep. On the evening of December 20th, Gacy drove to his lawyer's office in Park Ridge to attend a scheduled meeting to discuss the progress of his civil suit. On his arrival, Gacy appeared disheveled and immediately asked for an alcoholic drink. His attorney fetched a bottle of whiskey from his car. On his return, his lawyer asked Gacy what he had to discuss with him. Gacy picked up a copy of the Daily Herald from his lawyer's desk, pointed to the front page article covering the disappearance of Robert Piest, and said, "This boy is dead. He's dead, and he's in a river." Gacy then proceeded to give a rambling confession that ran into the early hours of the following morning. He had begun informing his lawyers he had been the judge, jury, and executioner of many people, and that now he wanted to be the same for himself. He said he had buried most of his victims in his crawl space and had disposed of 5 other bodies in the Des Plaines River. Gacy dismissed his victims as male prostitutes, hustlers, and liars, adding he sometimes awoke to find dead, strangled kids on his floor with their hands cuffed behind their back. As a result of the alcohol he had consumed, Gacy fell asleep midway through his confession. The lawyers immediately arranged a psychiatric appointment for Gacy at 9 a.m. that morning. On awaking several hours later, Gacy shook his head when informed by his lawyers that he had confessed to killing approximately 30 people, saying, "Well, I can't think about that right now. I've got other things to do." Ignoring his lawyer's advice regarding his scheduled appointment, Gacy left their office to attend to the needs of his businesses. Gacy later recollected his memories of his final day of freedom being hazy, adding he knew his arrest was inevitable, and that he intended to visit his friends and say his final farewells. After leaving the lawyer's office, Gacy drove to a gas station while filling his rental car with gas. He then handed a small bag of cannabis to the attendant. After he gave the bag to the attendant, he rushed out and drove away. The officers who had been tailing him immediately ran into the building, and the attendant would immediately hand the bag to the surveillance officers, adding that Gacy had just told him, "The end is coming for me. These guys are going to kill me," and said he just tossed this to us and left. Gacy would then drive to his home of a fellow contractor and friend, Ronald Rode. Gacy hugged Rode before bursting into tears, saying, "I've been a bad boy. I've killed 30 people, give or take a few." Gacy had left Rode and drove to Cram's home to meet with Cram and Rosie. As he drove along the expressway, the surveillance officers noted he was holding a rosary clenched to his chin, praying while he drove. After talking with Cram and Rosie, Gacy had Cram drive him to a scheduled meeting with lawyer Leroy Stevens on the northwest side. As Gacy spoke with Stevens, Cram informed the surveillance officers that Gacy had told him and Rosie that he had confessed to over 30 murders with his lawyers that previous evening. Gacy then had Cram drive him to Mary Hill Cemetery where his father had been buried. As Gacy drove to various locations that morning, police outlined the formal draft of their second search warrant, specifically to search for the body of Robert Piest in the crawl space. On hearing from the surveillance detectives that, considering his erratic behavior, Gacy might be about to commit suicide, police decided to arrest him on a charge of possession and distributing marijuana in order to hold him into custody. At 4:30 on December 21st, the eve of the hearing of Gacy's civil suit, Judge Marvin J. Peters granted the request of a second search warrant. After police informed Gacy of their intentions to search his crawlspace for the body of Piest, Gacy denied the teenager was buried there, but confessed to having killed the kid in self-defense, a young man whose body was buried under his garage. Armed with the signed search warrant, police and evidence technicians drove to Gacy's home. On their arrival, officers found Gacy had unplugged his sub pump, flooding the crawlspace with water. To remove the water, they simply just replaced the plug and waited for the water to drain. After the water was gone, the evidence technician, Daniel Gintley, entered the 28 by 30 foot crawl space, crawled into the southwest area and began digging. Within minutes, he had uncovered putrefied flesh and a human arm bone. He immediately shouted to the investigators that they could charge Gacy with murder, adding, "I think this place is full of kids." A police photographer then dug in the northeast corner of the crawlspace, uncovering a graveyard. The two then began digging in the southeast corner, uncovering 2 lower leg bones. The victims were too decomposed to be Piest. As the body discovered in the northeast corner was later unearthed, a crime scene technician discovered the skull of a second victim alongside the body. After they started digging at the feet of the second victim, it revealed a skull beneath the body. Because of this, technicians returned to the trench where the first body was unearthed, discovering the rib cage of a fourth victim within the crawlspace, confirming the scale of the murders. After being informed that the police had found human remains in his crawlspace and that he would be now faced with murder charges, Gacy told officers he wanted to clear the air, adding he had known his arrest was inevitable since the previous evening. In the early morning hours of December 22nd and the persistence of his lawyers, Gacy provided a formal statement in which he confessed to murdering approximately 30 young males, all of whom he claimed had entered his house willingly. Some victims were referred by name, but Gacy claimed to not know or remember any of the names or faces. He claimed that they were all runaway teenage males or male prostitutes, the majority of whom were buried in his crawlspace. Gacy claimed to have dug only 5 of the victims' graves in this location and had his employees, including Gregory Godzik, dig the remaining trenches so that he would have graves available. When shown a driver's license which had been found on his property, Gacy claimed not to know him, but admitted that this license had been in the possession of one of his victims. In January 1979, he planned to conceal the corpses even further by covering the entire crawl space with concrete. When questioned specifically about Piest, Gacy confessed to luring him to his house and strangling him on the evening of December 11th. He also admitted to having slept alongside Piest's body that evening before disposing of the corpse in the Des Plaines River in the early hours of December 13th. On his way to the police station, he had been in a minor traffic accident after disposing of Piest. His vehicle had slid off the ice-covered road and had been towed off from its location. Accompanied by police, his lawyers, and his older sister, Gacy was driven to the I-55 bridge on December 23rd to pinpoint the spot where he confessed to have thrown the body of Robert Piest and 4 other victims into the river. Gacy was then taken to his house and instructed to mark his garage floor with orange spray paint to show where he had buried the individual he had supposedly killed in self-defense and whom he named John Butkovich. During his confession, Gacy drew a rough diagram of his basement on a phone message sheet to indicate where their bodies were buried. Cook County Medical Examiner Robert Steen supervised the digging. Each victim unearthed from the crawl space was placed in a body bag, which was placed near the front door awaiting transportation to the mortuary. In some cases, bodies were found with foreign objects, such as prescription bottles, lodged into their pelvic region, the position of which would indicate the items had been thrusted into the victim's anus forcefully. Gacy's vacant house would ultimately be demolished in April 1979. In June 1978, Gacy began discarding the bodies of his victims in the Des Plaines River as his crawl space was full. The victim was found 6 miles or 9.7 kilometers downstream from the I-55 bridge on June 30th and was not connected initially to Gacy's murder. But in January 1979, the victim was identified using fingerprinting records and identifying a tattoo on his left bicep reading Tim Lee. Following Gacy's arrest, investigators discovered that he was yet another victim of the killer clown. On April 9th, 1979, a decomposed body was discovered entangled in the exposed roots on the edge of Des Plaines River in Grundy County. The body was identified using dental records as being that of Robert Piest. Gacy was brought to trial on February 6, 1980, and was charged with 33 murders. He was tried in Cook County, Illinois, before Judge Lewis. The jury was selected from Rockford because of the extensive press coverage in Cook County. At the request of his defense counsel, Gacy spent over 300 hours with doctors at the Menard Correctional Center in Chester in the year before his trial. He underwent a variety of psychological tests before the panel of psychiatrists to determine whether he was mentally competent to stand trial. Gacy attempted to convince the doctors that he had multiple personality disorder. He claimed to have 4 personalities: the hardworking, a civic-minded contractor, the clown, and a policeman called Jack Hanley, whom he referred to as Bad Jack. His lawyer opted to have Gacy plead not guilty by reason of insanity to charges against him. Presenting Gacy as a Jekyll and Hyde character, the defense produced several psychiatrist experts who had examined Gacy. 3 psychiatrists at Gacy's trial testified that they found him to be a paranoid schizophrenic with multiple personalities. The prosecutors presented the case that Gacy was sane and in full control of his actions. To support this contention, they produced several witnesses to testify to the premeditation of Gacy's actions and the efforts he took to escape detection. Cram and Rosie testified that Gacy had made them dig drainage trenches and spread bags of lime in his crawlspace. Both had said Gacy would look periodically into his crawlspace to ensure they and no other employees they supervised did not deviate from the precise locations he had marked. When Gacy's defense team suggested that all 33 deaths were caused by accidental erotic asphyxiation, Stein called this highly improbable. During the 5th week of the trial, Gacy wrote a personal letter to the judge requesting a mistrial, for the reasons including that he did not approve of his lawyer's insanity plea, that his lawyers had not allowed him to take the witness stand, that his defense had not called enough medical witnesses, And lastly, that the police were lying with regard to verbal statements he had allegedly made to detectives after his arrest, and that in any event, the statements were self-serving for use by the prosecution. The judge addressed Gacy's letter by informing him that both counsels had not been denied the opportunity or funds to summon expert witnesses to testify, and that under the law, he had the choice whether he had wished to testify and was free to indicate as much to the judge if he wished to do so. So the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours and found Gacy guilty of 33 charges of murder. At the time, his conviction for 33 murders was the most for which any person in the United States history had ever been convicted. In the sentencing phase of the trial, the jury deliberated for more than 2 hours, sentencing Gacy to death for each murder committed after the Illinois statute of capital punishment came into effect in June 1977. His execution was set for June 9th, 1980. Gacy was then transferred to Menard Correctional Center, where he remained incarcerated on death row for 14 years. On February 15th, 1983, Henry Brisbane, a fellow death row inmate known as the I-57 killer, stabbed Gacy in the upper arm with a sharpened wire as Gacy was participating in a voluntary work program. A second death row inmate injured in the attack, William Jones, received a superficial stab wound to the head. Both received treatment in the prison hospital for their wounds. In mid-1984, the Supreme Court of Illinois upheld Gacy's conviction and ordered his execution by lethal injection on November 14th. Gacy had filed an appeal against this decision, which was denied by the Supreme Court of the United States on March 4th, 1985, and the judge would go on ahead and say, "Fuck off, you're not getting off with this one. You killed 33 fucking people. You're gonna die, you dirty son of a bitch." That following year, Gacy filed a further post-conviction petition seeking a new trial. His then defense lawyer, Richard Kling, argued that Gacy had been provided with ineffective legal counsel at his 1980 trial. His post-conviction petition was dismissed on September 11th, 1986, with the judge slamming his gavel, telling him to go ahead and fuck off and go back to your little cage, you wild animal. Gacy appealed the 1985 decision that he be executed. The Illinois Supreme Court upheld his conviction on September 29th, 1988, setting a new execution date of January 11th, 1989. After the U.S. Supreme Court denied Gacy's final appeal on October 1993, the Illinois Supreme Court formally set an execution date for May 10th, 1994. On the morning of May 9th, 1994, Gacy was transferred from the Menard Correctional Center to Stateville Correctional Center in Crest Hill to be executed. That afternoon, he was allowed a private picnic on the prison grounds with his family. And for his last meal, what do you guys think that he had? I mean, when you're on death row, you can literally pick anything that you want to eat. He ironically had ordered a giant bucket of the Colonel's delicious KFC, a dozen fried shrimp, French fries, and fresh strawberries, and a Diet Coke. Don't get me wrong, that was actually a pretty good last meal. But why the Diet Coke? I don't get that. There's literally no health, anything that you have to worry about in this moment. You're getting ready to die. Get you the biggest thing of Coke or Pepsi or whatever, and do that. Don't waste your drink on a diet anything. That's horrible. That evening, he observed his prayer with a Catholic priest before being escorted to the Stateville execution chamber to receive his lethal injection. And when he was asked if he had any last words, he just snarled and said, "Kiss my ass." Before the execution began, the chemicals used in the execution solidified unexpectedly, clogging the IV tube used to administer the chemicals into Gacy's arm, complicating the procedure. Blinds covering the window for the witnesses to watch had actually been drawn in this moment. The execution team replaced the clogged tube. After 10 minutes, the blinds were reopened, and then the execution resumed. The entire procedure took 18 minutes. Could you imagine laying on a table getting ready to die, and then they're like, "Oh, hold on, gotta hold on a minute, hold on. I know you getting ready to die. You ain't going nowhere. You ain't going nowhere. Go ahead and sit there for a minute. Let him stew in it. I don't give a shit. It could have taken 3 hours. Let him just lay there. I mean, he had so many people that suffered and suffered horribly. So the 18 minutes didn't seem long enough for me, but that's just me. Anesthesiologists had blamed the problem on the prison officials, saying that had correct execution procedures been followed, the complications would never have occurred. This error apparently led to Illinois adopting an alternative method of lethal injections. On this subject, one prosecutor at Gacy's trial, William Kunkel, said he got a much easier death than any of his victims. According to the published reports, Gacy was a diagnosed psychopath who did not express any remorse for his crimes. In the hours leading up to Gacy's execution, a crowd estimated over 1,000 people gathered outside the correctional center. A vocal majority were in favor of the execution, although a number of anti-death protesters were also present. Some of the people that were in favor of the execution were wearing t-shirts saying, "No tears for the clown." After Gacy's death was confirmed at 12:58, on May 10th, 1994, his brain was removed. It is in the possession of Helen Morrison, a witness for the defense at the Gacy trial, who has interviewed Gacy and other serial killers in an attempt to isolate common personality traits of violent psychopaths. His body would go on to be cremated. Wow, that was an earful of murder, and it just shows you how disgusting a human being can be. You know, he had the rough upbringing, and I think that has a lot to do with it. Him being gay and his father just being so anti-gay, I think that rubbed off on him too, you know, and that's why he would kill these men, because he would satisfy himself, but then it's like, he's mad because of what these men are, even though almost all of them weren't gay, but he was just disgusted either with himself and then just murdered him out of just hatred that came from his father. And I think his father just passed that down, and it just turned into this fucking twisted cyclone of a fucking horrible individual that destroyed so many lives. 33 people. That's a lot of people, right? Add at least 2 to those 33. That's how many people were affected. I mean, just 2, the parents. That's not including siblings, relatives, kids, anybody that might have been involved with these people. He took them away from them. He's just one fucked up individual. But that was a really long one, guys. That was a long one. Probably my longest I'm going to do for a while. So let's go ahead and just gather all this information back up and jump into this week's Top 5 Twisted Recap. Number 1. Gacy had a rough upbringing, constantly being belittled by his father all the time. He was also beaten severely, even when he did nothing to provoke it. His father would call him all types of names, including Sissy Boy and Pansy. Number 2. Gacy has a daughter and a son. He would go on to take up after the Colonel and soil the good KFC name and run multiple stores. Number 3. Gacy was charged of sodomy and was sentenced to 10 years behind bars, but was released a little under 2 years after being incarcerated due to being a model prisoner and having outstanding behavior. Number 4. Gacy would start a construction company, and this is where it would really take off, and he would even murder multiple of his employees. Number 5. In all reality, Gacy was a powerful man with friends in high places and thought because of it he could get away with murder. Gacy murdered at least 33 young men and boys and buried 26 of them in his crawl space of his house or in his bed underneath his bedroom and just throughout the property. His victims included people he knew and random individuals he lured from the Chicago's Greyhound bus station, Bughouse Square, or simply off the streets, with the promises of a job with PDM, an offer of a drink or drugs or money for sex. Some victims were grabbed by force, others conned into believing Gacy was a policeman. Wow. And there's your Gacy story, guys. What'd you guys think of it? I know when I was going through the story and I was reading it, it took me a long time, and it's just, it's so crazy. It's just, it's so crazy. I couldn't imagine somebody luring me into a situation and just being in that situation, just being horrified. And you know what? Good that this man got the death penalty. I am for the death penalty on certain circumstances, and this is one that is definitely one that needs to sit. And I think that a firing squad by loved ones would have done a lot better, or maybe the guillotine. Yeah, and so with that, we're going to go ahead and jump in to this week's Florida Man. All right, really quick. Every week I search Florida Man and the date that I'm doing it, so I'm going to do that right now. Okay. A Florida man faces additional charges after allegedly trying to smuggle drugs into a jail using his prosthetic leg. Okay. According to police, 37-year-old Kenneth tried to bring in Xanax pills and a gram of fentanyl into the county jail. The Florida man was arrested earlier that night for possession of cocaine and resisting arrest. Really quick, how are you going to resist arrest with only one leg? Like, did he see me, if I had one leg, I'd pick up the leg and I'd swing it at the cops and I'd fucking hop away. Kind of like that one lady off of My Name is Earl. Whenever he sits here and talks about one of the things he needs to fix is whenever he stole a car from a one-legged person and then she started shooting at him from behind. Like, don't underestimate a one-legged person. They'll take their leg off and beat the hell out of you with it. Before being taken into lockup, authorities asked Adams if he had anything hidden in his prosthetic leg, and to which he said no. Adams now faces an additional 2 charges for the drugs because they were found in his prosthetic leg. So they did a little search, and when they were bringing him into the jail, they're like, all right, go ahead and pop your leg off. And oh, no, hold on, I don't know if I can do that. Sir, go ahead and pop your leg off. It's just us, Pop that leg off. And then just baggies of drugs fell onto the ground. He's like, oh, I don't know how they got there. This isn't even my leg. This is my friend's leg. I'm borrowing it. How fucking ridiculous is that? And there you go. There's your Florida man. You never know what you're going to get. It's always something different every single time. But you know what's always different every single time as well? Today's Twisted Updates. Thank you guys for making it to the end of the episode, and as you guys well know, if you make it to the end of the episode, you are officially a member of the Twisted Couch Club. Ha! Pat yourselves on the back. That's amazing. Good job. Good work, you listening all the way through to the end. Where can you find the pictures? Because I post pictures about everything. Look in the description. I have it all categorized very nice and neatly with donations, pictures, where I got my research, etc. Because the social media pages are a bunch of pussies and won't let me put these pictures up, I have to sit here and do it like this. So if you want to see some pictures, check the link below. All right, sneak peek. For next week is going to be Jeffrey Dahmer. And this motherfucker is sick and twisted as they come. So who's Jeffrey Dahmer? He's a type of cannibal, but not your everyday cannibal like Issei Sagawa, just going and killing somebody and trying to eat them. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and listen to Issei Sagawa and listen to all the other episodes, and you'll get my references that I make throughout each episode. Okay, for the countries that are new listeners, every single country is going to get their own bonus episode. I'm in the works of the Finland episode right now. I have it. I just keep running out of time. I'm so sorry. I have a family, 6 kids. I work 10-hour days, 6 days a week. And then the little time that I have, I put a story together and then I record and everything else. So there's a lot that goes into this that not a lot of people know about. And that's why the delay is there. I'm doing the best I can, and they will be out. It's just a little bit later than anticipated. Finland, Canada, United Kingdom, Denmark, India, and Japan. In that order, there's the bonus episodes. I'm going to try and release one at least 2 a month, but we'll see what I can do. I'm going to do the best I can. But as soon as once I make enough money doing this, I'm just going to do this full time and then just smash out episodes and just have multiple podcasts and have a really fun time. But I just want to take a quick moment and thank you guys so much for the support. I truly didn't know how this was going to start. I really thought that it was going to be a bust. But every week I look and I'm seeing more downloads and more YouTube views, and people are hitting me up and people are messaging me, giving me ideas. I literally have a list of people to go through and ideas, like 100 different topics. Like, I'm going to be doing this for a while. I ain't going nowhere. And I just want to thank you guys. And thank you so much for just all your love and support. Keep it coming. Keep spreading that sick twist. And, I've always wanted to do something like this. Even whenever I was a kid, my father would always listen to MLB on, Major League Baseball on the radio. You couldn't just, pop it on the TV as easily as, nowadays. And Sammy Sosa was my favorite player back then. And I would sit here, I had a little boombox and put tapes in there, and I would hit record, and I would literally do a play-by-play of Sammy Sosa, hitting home runs or whatever they were doing. And throughout my high school, I was sitting here wondering, how do people get into radio and talk shows and stuff like that? I've always wanted to do something like this. So, it's been within me my whole life, and just seeing it come to life and just watching one little idea that I had, one little idea blow up into this, and I got people hitting me up about something, my idea, and it's just, it's so amazing, and I cannot thank you guys enough. I have no idea what the downloads are at. Every time I look, they're higher. They're at 170 or 180 last time I looked, who knows. Just keep doing your guys' job and keep spreading the twist. Tell anybody who you think is going to want to listen. You guys are just truly amazing twist heads, and just thank you for all the love and support and all that. I would be forever in all y'all twist heads' debt if I could get a 5-star rating on iTunes. Leave a comment. It doesn't matter what you say. It's not for me or anything. It's literally so I can move up in the charts, because the algorithms and everything, it's just how it works. Thumbs up the video if you're, watching the video. Like it, heart it, wherever you're at. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel and help it grow. If you guys have any people, topics, places, things, personal stuff, anything that you guys want to bring to the show, if you have a personal story or anything, like, I'm going to release a bonus episode of my paranormal story, and that one's going to be easier to do simply because I know what happened. But email in your stories, and I will read them at the end or make an episode or whatever. Email in your stories. I want to know what they are. twistedcouchtalkproductions at gmail.com. twistedcouchtalkproductions at gmail.com. You guys know the email. Get over there and let me know what's going on. Simply because there's just so much twisted talk to be had. And give me some feedback, give me a little bit of feedback. I want to hear from you guys. What do you think of the twist? Could it be improved? Tweak things here and there. I want to know. I want to make this literally the best thing for you guys. You can find the podcast absolutely everywhere, and even YouTube, except for Pandora. I don't know what is up their ass. They will not put my podcast up, and that's fine. Maybe you guys, if you listen to Pandora or you listen on Pandora, send them an email. Blow them up. Hey, why isn't Twisted Couch Talk on Pandora? And that'll be because of you guys, because they won't respond to me. Don't forget to go over to the Facebook page and click that follow button. Wipe all that grease off from Colonel Sanders' sweet-ass chicken and tap the follow button, because if you got grease on your finger, it's not going to register. Lick your finger and tap, 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 to tap, tap, tap. Like Happy Gilmore, just tap it in. Just tap that follow button now. And that way you guys stay in the now and you'll know what's going on. Like, I made the announcement that I will not be doing a bonus episode this week. It's coming. If you guys get on Facebook, you're going to know about all that. Now, Patreon. Really, 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 really quick. Patreon is made of 4 tiers. Or you can go to the bottom of the list and pick your own donation. Any donation, I would love it so deeply. It'll make it to where I can upgrade equipment, do this full time, etc., etc. On top of that, you will get the episode 2 days early. Not as much edited out, and, how much better can that get, getting the episode earlier. Every single person that donates on Patreon and or PayPal, you guys will get a shout out at the end. There will be a nice list of shout outs, kind of like credits, but it's going to be each and every one of you guys, whether it's your names or whatever you want to promote at the time. I will go ahead and put that in and give you guys all shout outs and some merch. All right. I hear you guys. I have some ideas for merch. I've mentioned them before. I'll mention them again really quick. You hear about that Issei Sagawa bastard that pops up in the episode so many times. He's slowly developed into this character that is kind of like a Roadrunner or Wile E. Coyote. You know, he's the Roadrunner, but he's the bad one, right? And then Bob Ross, the artist that passed, he's this badass cigar-smoking biker motherfucker that just tries to hunt him down all the time. And I'm going to have some merch based off of that, some logos and stuff here and there. But I cannot get merch to you guys, the people that do hit me up about it, unless we have enough people. I mean, there's no sense in me making merchandise if there's no buyers. You see what I'm saying? So I need you guys to just spread that sick twist as much as you possibly can. But enough of this business bullshit. Let's go ahead and get away from this evil-ass clown and put this twisted book back on the shelf. I hope all of you enjoyed the telling of that story as much as I did. And I look forward to seeing you on the couch next Friday with another twisted journey into the abyss. But for now, put your handcuffs away. Don't sodomize any teenage boys ever. Just put your couches back, kick out your friends, and we'll see you guys next Friday on the couch. And as always, stay twisted, you twisted mother lovers.